Another year of metal has passed. Metal, rock, really this whole entire style of music that we are just obsessed with. And later on this week, we're going to be talking about some of the best albums of the year, but today we can't do that. Today we have to go the other direction. Today we have to talk about the 10 worst albums of the year, and there has to be a little bit of a precursor here. Mostly because there's been confusion over past years about some things that don't make the list or some things that do or whatever. These lists are based off of albums that I've heard. It's not necessarily albums that I've reviewed, and it has to be especially true here in 2018 since there haven't been a lot of reviews. 2019 is going to change that, mark my words. But we have to talk about some shit. We have to talk about the worst of the worst, at least the ones that I heard. I want to know what your list of the 10 worst of the year is. Post them in the comments while you listen to mine, and away we go. These are the 10 worst albums of the year 2018 in the rock and heavy metal spectrum. Number 10 is Deicide with Overtures of Blasphemy. It feels like it was just yesterday, mostly because it was about 6 or 7 years ago that we were speaking about Deicide in such a very positive light. They had an album that actually made it to the top list of the year. But ever since then, this stuff has become a little bit paint by number. Now, I understand that many will argue that death metal in its purest form is basically that. It is very paint by number. You kind of get exactly what you paid for. But whenever I listened to this album, the energy just didn't feel like it was there. Glenn felt like he was just going through the motions. Deicide right now needs a real big recovery unless they want to start to make the canvas of these lists near the bottom as opposed to where they were earlier this decade, which was near the top. Number 9 is Bullet for My Valentine with Gravity, and oh my lord. Bullet for My Valentine is this up and down band, it seems like. During the first part of their career, they had a lot of energy, they were very up-tempo, they had a lot of greatness that seemed to be attached to them, but these last couple of albums have been sort of the slow decline. Almost like watching a team that was at one point maybe on the cusp of winning a championship, or at least doing something that was relevant, and then all of a sudden somehow turning into the Cleveland Browns. Gravity was just a really boring release. It was one that really didn't lend itself to its own style, and as you noticed, it was an album that as quickly as it was released and as quickly as it came out, it was very quickly forgotten about. This was one of those albums that, in order to make this list, I had to go back to my log and realize that I actually had listened to it. I thought that Gravity was released in some other year or in some other decade. It's a really bad album. And really, if you're a fan of Bullet for My Valentine, I do apologize for this, mostly because I know this group has the potential to have talent. I just don't know why they don't show it. Number 8 is Phil Anselmo with Choosing Mental Illness as a Virtue. Technically, it's Phil Anselmo and the Illegals. This one's mostly just on Phil. Again, he has kept himself extremely busy over these last couple of years. He has 10,000 bands. Of course, he's closing some, opening others, doing this, doing that. This is an album that almost felt like it was just rejected tracks that did not work with any other album or any other project that Phil has on his plate. And instead, they were able to go into the studio and pump out an album based around it. There was brutality here, and there certainly was a couple of ideas that felt like it was on the specter or on the cusp of doing something that was interesting, but as a whole, this was a release that just felt really disjointed. It didn't have a very good sort of purpose in mind or a theme in mind. It didn't have what was really necessary, unless the necessary idea was just to go for absolute audio chaos, then I guess this is the best album of the year. But really, it doesn't bear itself toward re-listens. It doesn't have a great shelf life value. This is sort of a one-and-doner. And really, for somebody like Phil, who has released great solo albums in the past, mind you, it felt like a massive, massive dud. Number 7 is Crescent with The Order of Amenti. Now, I'll be honest, I might be going a little harsh with this album because what this band aims to do is to try to not so much copy-paste the style of Nile, but really go with that Egyptian-themed metal idea. And I understand what they're trying to go with it, but the resulting album was just really dull. This is one where they have long tracks that don't really go very many places. They sort of just meander around. They repeat a lot of ideas and don't really do too much to expand their horizons. I feel like this is a young metal band that is still trying to sort of catch their breath and understand who they are, kind of get their feet on to dry land and remember how to walk, because Crescent definitely feels like they have a lot of great tools. However, the Order of Amenti is a disc that just goes on forever, and forever is a long, long time whenever it's only meant to be a 50-minute disc, or whatever, however the length is. This is a disc that just, I see the potential, but the potential was not realized. This was hard to get through the first time, not to mention even harder to get through the fourth or the fifth time. Crescent, I know that you guys have it in you. Just go back and keep on working. You're going to be alright, but for right now, you're one of the worst albums of the year. Number 6 is Ministry with Americant, and now we're really getting into some garbage. Now we're really getting into stuff that has really festered and smelled since the beginning of the year. This was one of the first releases of 2018 that gained any sort of reputation, and believe me, 2018 gained a reputation very quickly. But Americant is kind of showcasing where Ministry is right now. And of course, if you remember Ministry, they were a group that was a little bit more fun and free. There was a little bit more exploration there. There were messages that were sort of scattered within. If you remember albums such as Psalm 69 or even Filth Pig, it just felt like everything was all over the place, and that chaos was what really made them a really strong band. But that, of course, was the first part of the 1990s, or the latter portion of the 1980s. The band right now feels like they are just begging to be put out the pasture and have a bullet put into Old Yeller. This is just ridiculously bad, and it's trying very hard to make this this America message because of the Trump administration and all the politics and the SJW stuff and blah, 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 this and that. I'm just not even going to try to get into that. Tell me a decent story with your music. Tell me a decent thing within your songs. Don't, you're trying so hard that it shows. And whenever you're being a try-hard, then you're going to have an album that reflects that try-hard status, which is exactly what Americant is. This is a try-hard album, and 2018 had a little bit of a bad history whenever it came to people trying way too hard, whenever they should just calm down and get back to some of the basics of what makes Ministry a group that we have talked about now for more than 3 decades. Just bad, bad, bad. Holy crap, this was pathetic. Number 5 is Ectomorph with Fury. I don't actually have much to say about this album except for one word: boring. This was a disc that was not very long. This was a disc that should have been a wham bam thank you ma'am steamroller of a disc, and should have just felt average at the very best. It's really, I remember, very similar to Deicide, Ectomorph was a band that I remember approaching with positivity just earlier in this very same decade. But instead, this disc, the approach that it takes, it feels like it's, again, a very paint-by-number album. One where they went to the studio, didn't decide to make any sort of change or any sort of difference to their sound, and it shows. It shows, considering this is a group that is, instead of using maybe their A+ or A- material, went in with material that was not even C-worthy and decided that it was the greatest stuff that they could really produce for this disc, popped it out onto a CD and released it to the public, and the result is that no one's talking about it except for me. Because it's that bad of a disc. It does not lend itself to memory. It will never lend itself to memory. Sure, there was Fury because there were growling vocals on here, but man, that's all the Fury is. There is no Fury whenever it comes to this scaling the lists of greatness. Instead, it scales the list of shit. Number 4, Five Finger Death Punch with Injustice for None. Maybe this should have been number 5, for irony. Oh my lord. The story of Ivan Moody and Five Finger Death Punch, all the things that have happened over these past couple of years, and I'm sure some of you are sick and goddamn tired of me talking about Five Finger Death Punch every single year on lists like this. And believe me, I am too. But I continuously want to give this band a chance because, like some of the others on this list, I know they have it in them. I know that the talent exists. I know that the passion exists. And I know that Ivan and the band went through a lot over the past couple of years, and then had to indulge and embark on a lot of criticism and a lot of negativity, but they come back with an album that does nothing to help them out. It does nothing in order to erase the negative ideas that were present from the past. Instead, we are left with just another disc where you're just begging for them to sort of get out of this juvenile pro-military thing, not because that's necessarily bad, but the thing is that it's being approached by somebody who barely registers as an adolescent. This is one that just feels like it is every tough guy or every tough woman that you've ever seen in high school walking down the halls that want to be part bully but then part hero. The one thing that happens whenever that occurs is all that tough boy antics. Whenever you get approached by somebody else that wants to knock you down, you get knocked down. You get knocked down again, and justice for none is more like, and good music for none. That's exactly what this album is. Good music for none, except for those that have been continuously indulging their ears with such mediocre dribble. Man. Number 3, Turbo Negro with Rock and Roll Machine. I like Turbo Negro! I've liked them! Ever since I got a record of Ass Cobra, a vinyl of Ass Cobra from a fan, this has been a group that I have loved to go back to and play just for the hell of it. So whenever I saw that 2018 painted a brand new album for my ears, I was very excited. But I, of course, also was very wise up to my history. I know that core lineup that was able to deliver us such classics such as Scandinavian Leather was no longer the group that was delivering us these songs, this album. This was a disc that during the first listen, I nearly shut off before it finished. That's not a good sign. Usually, first listens, I can breeze through, I can breathe, and I can say, all right, let's move forward. This one was a struggle. This one was like, I don't know, you want to start drinking, you want to, you had stopped smoking for 6 months, and then you decided, fuck it, I want to start again, because this is that bad. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Turbo Negro, I think to many fans, is dead because of albums such as this one and the previous that they released a few years back. Turbo Negro is no longer the band that is going to give us such great songs such as Turbo Negro Hates the Kids. They're a much different band than they were. That's not a good enough argument, but this album just did not have any sort of girth. It didn't have any sort of fun. It just exists. That's all it does. If you want to know why a lot of these albums are bad, it's because they feel like they just exist. They don't give you what it is that you look for whenever you listen to music, which is enjoyment. Either that or something that you can use as some sort of anthem, something that applies to your life. This just exists. Rock and Roll Machine might be accurate because it felt like a machine shat out this album and we got exactly what the machine settings was, set for, which was shit. Number 2, though, is Godsmack with When Legends Rise. When have I ever talked about Godsmack on a negative list or any list, really? This is a first. This is literally a first. Because Godsmack was one of those groups that came out during the late 90s that always had a sound that did set them apart and made them a little bit unique. Whether it was Solly's voice, whether it was the fact that they were towing the line closer to heavy metal, and then, even their acoustic stuff has a lot to offer. The Other Side EP being a fantastic representation of that. But When Legends Rise took all the edge, took every good thing that Godsmack had going for them, and completely abandoned it. They completely abandoned it for a more streamlined, very radio-friendly sound. Maybe it was because the last couple of albums didn't have the sales that were really expected. Maybe this is something where record labels are buying into the idea that rock and fringe line metal is dead. They've been buying into the bullshit from Gene Simmons and these other just idiots, Adam Levine, that just spout this garbage, that want to put the death nail into something that they supposedly were a part of. When Legends Rise is a boring disc that has no soul at all. This is almost like the guys just went in there, realized that their record label was demanding a different sound, gave them exactly that, and tried to pass it off like a Godsmack album. It is not a Godsmack album. This album is pure garbage. The legends aren't rising. No. The legends rose 20 years ago, and now legends have fell. They have fallen. They are gone. It is almost as though there was a great battle, and there was a younger man, or even an older man, or nobody at all. It could have been pure air, oxygen. Slice them down with a sword. They're done. They're gone. Unless, of course, their next album proves themselves to have some worth, but somehow I doubt that. We probably won't get that until 2024. And number 1, and this is obvious. I mean, come on. We've been talking about this for 12 months. You might as well just throw the fucking crown on their heads. Machine Head with Catharsis. This will feel like catharsis. finally uttering some of the things that I wanted to utter back in January, but I will now say. This is a long album, and that should be a good thing. Machine Head has produced long albums in the past with long tracks that had great flowing melody and kept you involved, kept you right there next to the music, but this one did not do that. Instead, every passing track just made you do one of these faces. Oh, what the fuck are they doing? What was Rob Flynn thinking? And we should have seen this coming, and in fact, some of us did see this coming whenever we heard, is there anybody out there? Whenever we saw the controversy that was mired with Phil and Selma because of the whole is Phil racist thing, blah, blah, blah. Is Phil the reason why Pantera is suffering with reputation? Yakety this, yakety that. I can't believe my own brothers are not, they're against me. Oh my gosh. I don't want to use the term SJW. I don't want to use this social justice warrior bullshit because it paints me in a bad way. Or it paints this person in a... Fuck that shit. This is just an album where a man that is probably 50 years old, I'm not going to look up his age because, you know, I'm not that good of a journalist, is spouting off like he's a 16-year-old girl. Like he's a 17-year-old boy on Tumblr with 5 different colors in his hair, 57 piercings, 46 tattoos, and everyone is like, can't get a job! This is ridiculous! This is an album that is also accented by the just terrible track Bastards at the end of it. There's faux rapping on this disc. There are some songs on here that try their best, that try to show this album in any sort of positive light. But then they're destroyed by lyricism. Then they're destroyed by little rants. They're destroyed by choruses that are supposed to have some sort of message that wasn't required, that wasn't necessary. None of this needed to happen. This album did not need to happen. And now Machine Head is going on hiatus or is breaking up because of it. You see what happened, Rob? Your band's done because they're fed up with your shit, and we are too! This album may go down as one of the worst of the decade. Not so much because all the songs on here are bad. Not necessarily because of that, but because of the seismic shift, the changeover in Machine Head was perhaps even worse than that of A Divinum Insanus by, Morbid Angel. This may actually be a larger and more detrimental, a more damning, destructive, hellish shift. And it's proven, considering Morbid Angel released an album last year. And they're fine. They're good. But this isn't going to happen for Machine Head. What is it with bands with M as their start? Metallica, Machine Head, Morbid Angel, McQueensryche. That's right, I just put an M in front of Queensryche because I'm addicted. I'm still... Dedicated to Chaos still irks me. Jeff Tate still irks me. Jeff Tate. Rob Flynn, fuck you! Catharsis is the worst album of the year. And I'm sure that'll garner some arguments. Argue away! I want to hear why you defend this disc. Do it. I want to hear it. There you have it. The 10 worst albums of 2018. I'm caked in sweat, as I should be. So that means it's been a good year for bad albums. I want to know your lists. Hopefully you've been typing them in the comments box below. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. We're going to have a lot of great content in 2019, and hit that notification bell. That way you know anytime a new video comes and when CKN streams go live. I am coverkillernation, and I'll see you later this week where we talk about good albums, and I'll probably still be caked in sweat because I'll be so excited. Take care.